If you're not already subscribed to this YouTube channel, go ahead and hit the subscribe button now, along with the bell icon, so you can be notified whenever a new video is posted. And if you're already subscribed, check and make sure that YouTube hasn't unsubscribed you. And of course, be sure to give the video a like as well as share it on your social media. The white supremacists hate that. And now, the Sunday address. This is a subject that I hadn't intended to speak on, but the more that I thought about it and heard other people commenting on it, the more that I thought that there was something that I should say about it. And this is on the subject of political hoaxes. Now, there have been a number of political hoaxes that have been pulled throughout American history. The Boston Tea Party was one, and the so-called Boston Massacre was another one, where you had propaganda saying that basically the Brits showed up, lined up, and gunned people down. There's been a lot of hoaxes and lies that have been used over the decades, including the Gulf of Tonkin incident. I detailed that for you here on this YouTube channel. The U.S. government claimed falsely that an American ship had been fired on by North Vietnamese forces, and of course it turned out 30-some-odd years later that Robert McNamara, who had been the Secretary of Defense at that time, admitted that, well, they didn't actually have any evidence of that, even though it was Lyndon Johnson who had claimed that they had. So political hoaxes are nothing new for the United States, and that brings us to the case of Edward Corsetine. This guy became famous as one of Elon's muskrats, and he went by the colorful name Big Balls. Well, this clown is back in the news again. This time, he and a woman were standing next to their car on Swan Street in Washington, D.C., several blocks from Logan Circle, when they claimed to have been accosted by multiple suspects. Now, the reports are, and I can only take it that this was from Big Balls, that there were about 10 or so of these youths who accosted him and the woman he was with. Now, there was a woman who was with him, and yet nothing was done to her, but the white media feels compelled to mention that there was a woman there, so I will too. For some reason, I'm getting Central Park jogger vibes from all this. I don't know why, but here's the point. Police arrested two of the youths who allegedly attacked Big Balls, and they charged these kids with unarmed carjacking. Only one small problem. There never was a carjacking. That never actually happened. Remember, the entire reason that this fiasco made news was because Big Balls claimed that these alleged assailants attempted to carjack him. Attempted to. Not that they actually did it. And the only thing we have for that is his words, such as it is, and I'll say this, consider the source. Now, according to him, this gang of unruly youths approached him outside of his vehicle and, as he put it, made a comment about taking it. Since when do carjackers make comments about taking a car? Carjackers make threats, not comments. They demand you hand over the keys or else. But he himself said nothing about any threats or demands, just an alleged comment about taking the car. Now, that's a phrase so vague it can mean anything, but the one thing it doesn't mean is that they actually took it. If this was a genuine carjacking, then shouldn't Big Balls have had the balls to say that they demanded the car keys? Instead, he says that they made a comment about taking it. That was the way he characterized it, as a comment. For all we know, this creep probably decided that he was going to run his mouth at these young people, and one of them probably said something to the effect of, "Man, you think that car's so slick? Man, somebody take that car." That's not the same as somebody saying, "I'm going to take that car," or "You're going to give it to me." But that didn't stop the thugs in blue from taking a report about a comment on the vehicle and suddenly claiming that it was a demand for the vehicle. Demanding the vehicle? Now that's a big jump from commenting about something to saying, "Give me the car." This is how the white media conjures magic, though. They say something that's false, but because they reach so many people, folks will see the white media is reporting on something, and they'll just sit there and repeat it mindlessly, so the white media can make their fantasy into reality. Like magic. But no car was ever actually stolen. That's the point. An alleged attempted carjacking is charged as a carjacking, basically. I could see it differently if there was just an assault charge. At least they could put forward the assertion that that had happened, though as brother Khalid Muhammad said, we question that. Someone beat up Big Balls, at least that's how his story goes, but truth be told, that's got to be one of the most lightweight beatings ever. 10 people jump on you, and you look as if basically you got into a small scrap with a tiny person. That's what this looks like. It reminds me of George Zimmerman, with these looks to be self-inflicted injuries, quote-unquote. But let's exercise some common sense here. You have a young punk with a very well-established track record of open bigotry. He lives in D.C. Nothing happens to him while he was in government working as one of Elon's muskrats. He's still there today, and now he's out on his own. He becomes the victim of an attempted carjacking. He doesn't actually get his car took. They tried to take it allegedly. There was also some loose talk about an iPhone being taken too. That's another claim that was made. iPhone got stolen. You know, those cell phones have GPS equipment on them. In fact, police routinely trace criminals by accessing their cell phone tower data to mark their movements. When your cell phone pings a cell phone tower in the vicinity, the police can use that information to track the movements and the location of that cell phone over time. That's how they crack a lot of crimes. And yet, here this White House staffer and alleged federal employee is. He claims to have been beaten up and almost carjacked by 10 people. His car wasn't stolen, but his cell phone was, allegedly, and yet the police who routinely track down cell phones all the time suddenly can't find this one? Did Big Balls forget to pay his cell phone bill or something? Are the cell phone towers in D.C. not working now? So the all-purpose black youths run up on this guy. They beat him up under what are still unknown circumstances. They give him what looks to be only a bloody nose. They got him outnumbered. They beat him up so they can take his car, and once they beat him down and he's all bloody, they leave the car and run off. But they did take the cell phone, which police have not been able to track the location of. A lot of people, particularly on the right, always were making comparisons about Jussie Smollett, bringing up his name every 5 minutes. Yeah, well, here's a real accurate comparison to Jussie Smollett, or the Central Park jogger case, or Susan Smith, who falsely claimed that some random black man had stolen her car while her babies were inside, when in reality she drowned them and then just made up a story. Tell me something, what's more plausible here? That this reprobate was legitimately assaulted by 10 randos who wanted to take his car and then left it, and yet all 10 of them ran off without taking anything except for the cell phone. They were more interested in giving him a bloody nose than in stealing his car. Is that more likely? Or that this reprobate went out, instigated something with some black youths that he saw, just like George Zimmerman did, provoked a fight with them, and then, just like George Zimmerman, this guy has what appear to be self-inflicted injuries, but he's claiming that he had been brutally attacked for no reason. Oh wait, that's not right. He did claim that there was a reason, that they were trying to carjack him. And this incident with one of Donald Trump's former administration staffers, this young punk, this was the rhetorical basis for the quote-unquote takeover of D.C., that this one incident justified wasting God knows how many hundreds of millions of dollars to put soldiers in the streets, and these guys are not even running around stopping any of the alleged crime sprees. Instead, they're doing DUI arrests, and because you're inside the District of Columbia, you're not supposed to be carrying any weapons, so they go ahead and confiscate those. That's what they got soldiers in the streets doing. Wasting hundreds of millions of dollars when you could go ahead and hire conscientious people, not the regular scum that they like to hire for the police, but you could go ahead and hire some conscientious, honorable people, and they would be working full time, not for the next 30 days, but for the next 30 years. And you would actually have people who are on the streets full time actually doing real police work. If someone is genuinely interested in fighting crime in DC, then that's what they would actually do. But of course, we know that's not what this is about at all. And as for Courtesine, or Coruscant, or whatever the hell his name is, isn't it interesting that he felt the need to remove his shirt to pose for the pictures? And you notice that the shirt is in one piece, which begs the question, why would he take off the shirt if the shirt's in one piece? Nobody ripped it off of him. He just decides, well, let me go ahead and take the shirt off. And he just so happens to be wearing white pants, too, because otherwise the few drops of blood that there were would have been impossible to see if he'd been wearing pants that were, say, denim blue. And his dark blue shirt, by the way, no bloodstains would show up there. So isn't it ironic that he decides to take off his shirt so that he can have the highest contrast between his pasty white skin and the few little droplets of blood, and the same thing on his pants? Everything about this says staged. Oh, and just for the Coleman Cruz, Candace Owens contingent of lame brains out there who still want to insist that, oh, this is legitimate, it's genuine, well, consider this. Do you know who took the photo of this corsetine character all bloodied up? You know who took the photo? A guy named Marco Ilez. And if that name sounds familiar, it should. Earlier this year, Marco Ilez was the DOGE employee who made international headlines when all of his racist quotes on Twitter suddenly came back to the surface, All the stuff he was saying about I was a racist before it was cool and all I want is a eugenics immigration policy and all the rest of that. He was forced to resign from DOGE in disgrace, but that's okay. They gave him his job back a couple of months later. But this is the guy who just so happened to be on the scene of this alleged attempted carjacking, and he just happened to be there right in time to take the photos. And keep in mind that the exact same time that Marco Ilez was getting dragged in the media, that was also the same time that Corsidine's own little dubious screen name came to light. So these two individuals who came on the scene at the exact same time, two of Elon Musk's little science projects, or whatever the hell they are, these two individuals earlier this month just so happened to be at the exact same place at the exact same time for this incident. And I'm sure that none of this was staged, right? Not one bit of it was. This is all just a bunch of coincidences. Just another in a seemingly endless string of coincidences that went along with this incident. I mean, you see how many acts of happenstance had to occur for this to all come together, but it was all genuine and real, and it wasn't staged. Right? And then there's the question of DC's finest, who just so happened to be right there at the scene of this alleged carjacking. How convenient. In fact, the thugs in blue in DC, who normally take 45 minutes to respond to anything, they were right there on the scene so fast that they caught at least two of the alleged suspects immediately. How convenient. As if they had been waiting for something, as if they had been right there waiting. Now, which one of these two scenarios actually fits the facts? Given what you know about the self-professed victim and the circumstances that actually occurred, does this actually look like a carjacking, an attempted carjacking, or like a staged political stunt? No, what I think is this punk went out, and being a part of the Trump administration, he decided that he was going to run his mouth at some black youths who he started an altercation with, and then afterwards he claims it was a carjacking, when in reality it was a young punk starting some mess with a couple of black teenagers. And of course you got to make sure that the cops are there on the scene, because they're there to bail him out, make sure he doesn't get dinged up too much. And that's the basis that Trump used for the takeover of DC. And that brings us to the other part of this issue. If Trump had decided that he was going to do a quote-unquote takeover of law enforcement in, say, Chicago, even though the crime stats there are also exaggerated by the white right, the media reality is that putting troops in the streets of Chicago actually would have been tenable. If he had spent time talking about crime on the south side of Chicago, the way the Fox News has for the last 10 or so years, and Chicago's political schizophrenia being what it is, the Orange Man could have done this, and it would have been far more defensible. At the very least, he would have had a leg to stand on and say, hey, you've been hearing about this stuff for the longest time. I said I'd get Chicago under control, and now I'm doing it. But as I explained, this isn't about public safety. Donald Trump wants this to be controversial as possible because this is about forcing the Epstein scandal out of the headlines. And you can't do that if you do a defensible action. You have to do something outrageous, something egregious, because causing outrage is the entire point. The real audience for this political theater happens to be Donald Trump's base, and that's the right word for them because base is what they are. He would much rather deal with outrage at putting soldiers in America's streets than the political outrage from his own base for not releasing the Epstein files. Trump's entire political lifeline is his base. He has to keep them on his side. He has to keep their morale as high as he can and prevent them from losing interest or worse, turning on him. So that's the reason why he has to do this and has to do it this way. And in my opinion, Big Balls is just basically doing his job as an administration staffer and just going in and doing whatever the administration needs him to. And in this case, he's taking one for the team. And now, what are the Democrats going to be doing about all this? That's the next question that needs to be asked. The DC takeover is not getting a retaliatory response from Democrats. They're not even talking about stopping it or retaliating for it. Instead, the Democrats are just saying, well, this is why you need to vote for us next year. That's all they're saying about it. Not one of them is talking about crafting any legislation to prevent this from happening in the future. Not one of them is talking about this needs to be the basis for a new impeachment of Trump. That's not what they're saying. But that's not to say that the Democrats don't have things that they actually are passionate about retaliating for, because what they're really concerned about is what's going on in Texas, where they're having that big redistricting fight going on in their legislature. Republicans there are plotting to erase what currently are Democrat majority districts just in time for the 2026 midterms. And Democrats are actually threatening to retaliate by doing the same thing in California and elsewhere. They're not going to their voters and saying, well, there's nothing we can do about this. They're not going to their voters and saying, well, this is why you need to vote for us and ain't gonna get none for it. Instead, they're saying there needs to be retaliation for this. We can't let this stand. Republicans are enacting a policy and Democrats are moving to use their offices that they do have to counter it, to retaliate for it. So when they see black cities being illegally taken over by Republican power grabs, and been seeing it since the Obama years, Democrats do nothing about it. But now the Republicans are coming for Democrat congressional seats. Suddenly Democrats want to fight. Democrats only fight for what they see as being in their interest. And black people having control of the politics of where we live ain't part of that agenda. At best, you can have some tether who has nothing but contempt for you. He can be installed as your mayor or congressperson. But as for actual foundational black Americans controlling our areas, Democrats are as opposed to that as the Republicans. Ignore their rhetoric. Politicians only use words for the sole sake of lying. I want you to start learning to look at what they do, or in this case, what they don't do, because that will tell you everything. So the orange man isn't the only one who's doing political theater. They're both doing it on both sides of the aisle. But don't you dare let anybody tell you, oh, see, this incident proves that crime's out of control. No, what it proves is that the politicians and their staffers are out of control. That's what it proves. Because I believe that if somebody were to actually look at courtesans' cell phone records, even if you don't find the cell phone itself because they ain't looking for it, if somebody tries to see what kind of emails this guy was sending in the days leading up to this alleged attempted carjacking, if somebody also looks and sees who the police officers on the scenes, who were they talking to? What the world were these guys doing? If somebody starts to dig into this case, I think that they'll find that there's plenty of evidence that all of this was staged, all of this was set up. And it's not the first time. Back in 1989, George H.W. Bush, Poppy Bush, he decided that he would do a little bit of political theater himself when he infamously claimed that there had been a baggie of crack cocaine that had been sold just across the street from the White House. Turned out later the Washington Post dug into that and found no, that was all set up by the DEA. It was all staged. All you got to do is have one of your undercover narcs tell some drug dealer, hey, why don't we go ahead and have a drug deal over here in Lafayette Park? They go ahead and do that, and then Poppy Bush can get in front of the cameras and falsely claim, this is crack cocaine. It was sold right across the street from the White House, and that's the reason why we need to spend more money to militarize the police, because the niggers are out of control. That's what happened back in the 1980s. And we see the same trick going on now. The only difference is instead of talking about crack, they're talking about carjackings. The times may change, the specific lie may be a little bit different, but the mentality behind it is not. It's always the same thing. So all this stuff is set up because Donald Trump understands exactly what his rabid racist base wants to see. You can give those degenerates a temporary sugar rush by having images of black people being harassed by the police. And in this case, you got both the domestic and the foreign arms of the enforcement arm of white supremacy at work here. So as far as they're concerned, oh, this is exactly what we need, is harassing black folks. It's probably started this way, but it's not going to be staying this way. It'll be interesting to see how this metastasizes over time. But one of the things that's not going to change is the Democrats deciding to allow this kind of stuff to go unabated. This is part of their political posture. Just like all the Republican Party's incessant chatter about capitalism and free markets will never ever translate into them actually instituting economic justice where black Americans are concerned. Under white supremacy, that's how it is. Both sides of the political aisle are merely putting on a show. Good evening, and be one. I'd like to take a moment to mention some of our contributors: Ginger Vine, Alfredo Roberts, Kenneth Johnson, Bobby Ross, and G. Mars. Salute to them and thank you to everyone for listening, liking, and sharing this message. Black empowerment only exists because of you.